All right, here we are again in the garage. This is a little thing I think I'm going to go ahead and talk about this little Model A coupe that I bought the other day down in Austin, Texas. I've built several of these cars. This is actually not a coupe; it's a roadster. Sorry about that. But in the past I'd have never said nothing. But I think I kind of think that this needs to be kind of recognized and talked about a little bit about this car. I got to digging on this car, and I got to realizing that this car has wore several hats. It's been built several different times, probably rebuilt, modified, remodified, updated, whatever, as the previous owners probably seen fit. From what I'm looking at, it was probably built in the early years of hot rodding. It's kind of a sort of a historical piece. It's not a recognizable car. Who knows, what the car was at one time. If it ever was anything, maybe it might have been an old hot rod that just run around in some neighborhood or something. Who knows? But I have found several things about it that I kind of want to point out, because I'm fixing to erase some of this old hot rod history right here, because I'm going to take a bunch of this out of here and clean it up some. I may leave some of it underneath the car, just grins and giggles. Ain't nobody knows it's under there but me, now you. But we'll start on the top of this car first, okay? This car might have, who really knows, it might have had a flathead in it, a V8 flathead, there is no telling what this car has all had in it. Right now it's got a small block Chevy in it, but there's no telling what it used to have in it when it first started out. By looking at the stuff on the old frame and the old mounts and stuff, I would just about say you have a flathead in it. We're going to start right up here, and I'm going to move this out of my way. It's got disc brakes on it now. Somebody's put on it. And I'm going to go, let me see here. Ooh, that little light's getting bright, ain't it? Okay, let's straighten that out. I'm going to switch this around. Okay, so you can see what I'm seeing. Okay, here, somebody's cobbled up a mount right here for this small block Chevy. I mean, it works, but that's pretty cobbly. But anyway, there's a piece of metal right here that you can see. You can see the edge of it right here. Piece of metal right here. And I can feel in here, and I can feel the old welds. There's been a mount right here of something. So they've had another motor set, and this was their motor mount, and they've cut it off with a torch right here. Grinded on a bit. Of course, you can see this pathetic looking thing right here. Now, this old Corvair box, and there wasn't Corvairs back in the 50s. So there's no telling what kind of steering column they might have had on it at one time. The car is channeled. Let's see where they channeled it over their frame. The frame is a homemade it's made out of like 1/4 inch C channel. And you can see right here they had a hole drilled right here. And then they've got this cover on it right here. This is where they had their wishbone connected to later years. But there's a hole right there. And I don't know if there's any more or not. But anyway, that's probably where they had their other steering box connected to right here. They had another steering box. A lot of times they used old pickup steering boxes and different things. Let me get, of course, I'm going to cut all this mess out of here that's in here now. And I'm getting rid of this Corvair box. I'm going with a Vega steering. I'm going to go cross steer on the front of the car. Put a box up here underneath this alternator up here. But you can see where they just raggedly just torched out that mount right there for their wishbone. Let me get down on this. It's very hard for me to get down. I had a wreck in a Model A, and I don't get up and down too good anymore. But see this bracket right here? There's the bracket right there they was using. They had real short wishbones on it. They had cut them off and made them real short. But at one time, they had really long wishbones on it. And this is where they connected. There's another one over there. You can see it hanging down right there. But they had their wishbones connected right here. You can see how that they bent this out. They actually welded it on the frame, and then they bent this out. So their wishbone would clear when it swung right here. So it connected right here, and the wishbone went up there to the front end up there. So that tells me that this thing has had real long wishbones in it at one time instead of these short ones. Really, they probably had their axle under the radiator where it originally belonged at. See, when this thing, of course, now this has got a homemade frame in it, so it don't belong nowhere. But originally a Model A, see this in here underneath the radiator. That's your cross member right here, or right in the radiator. And underneath of that is a area in there that your spring sits in. See that spring over there on that front end, that buggy spring? It fits up in there, and it's got these U-clamp things that clamps it on there. And normally the spring would sit right here. And by doing that, you know, then they have big old long wishbones that went back here, you know, and fastened on. Well, this whole, let me get up. It's hard for me to get up. I'm getting too old. This whole front end here is out of like a 41, 40 up to a 48 Ford. If someone wants to correct me on them years, that's okay. But it was in the later model, you know, 48 and down somewhere around 41 or somewhere in there, 40. They decided to, Ford decided to put the spring in front of the axle. Now, Model A's, we're talking 28, 29, even Model T's probably. I do know definitely on all the Model A's, 28 to 31, and then 32, 33, 34, probably 35, 36, 37, 38. All of those, this perch that's right here, where this spring connects, used to be right here on top of this bolt right here. This bolt that holds this wishbone in had a big perch that stood up right here, about that tall. And the spring connected right here and went across over that other one. So the spring was right on top of the axle instead of like this one that's in front of the axle. Well, back in the 50s, one of the ways that they had lowering these cars, probably a poor boy way, and I've seen it on a lot of old 50s builds and old cars that was built in the 50s and in the early 60s and stuff, hot rods. They would get these front ends, these later model front ends, you know, like 48, you know, back to, back to, like, I don't know, 40 or 41. And they put these things under here, and they could still put their spring underneath the radiator, but it put their axle back here. So the axle actually would go up here close to the frame and make the car sit lower. If the axle was under the spring and sat underneath it here, it'd be real tall in the front. Nowadays, and they started doing it back then too, especially on the West Coast. You've seen a lot of this stuff here on the East Coast. But on the West Coast, they started bending this axle right here, and they would heat it and bend it in a jig, and they'd drop them 4 inches, and they kept their spring on top, and that way their wheelbase didn't change on their car. By moving it from here to there, you lost what, 4 inches there, probably about 4 inches, 5 inches or so. That made your wheelbase shorter on your car. And these cars are squirrely enough, with a hot motor in them. We don't need to be losing no wheelbase. Besides that, it makes them look funny. It makes the front end of them look like it's just sticking out. The wheels are back here, and the front end's sticking out here. And to me, it just their proportion is off on them. I never did like them. And On top of that, on this one here, they bent the wishbones to make them parallel with the frame. I think that was some kind of a driving thing, tried to make them drive better. I'm really not sure what that was about. I've seen that, but I've never really had a good explanation on it, or maybe it's just they liked the way it looked. But originally, these wasn't bent right here. You know, they was straight, and they was longer, way longer, and they cut them off real short. Probably because when they had them on this car, and since this car is channeled, there's a chance that the wishbone was bumping the bottom of the car right here, and they probably, when they done that, they probably channeled the car later, a little bit later or something, so they moved that, scooted that up, and they channeled the car. Ain't no telling, it just about had to be that way, because if they channeled the car with those wishbones under there like that, they had to, when it hit bumps, those wishbones would go up and down, they'd probably hit the bottom of the car. So they done that. Also, this radiator here was an old thing they used to do. They used to get these out of Ford 9-inch tractors and also fork trucks. If you notice how close them fins are, that's an industrial thing. You didn't see that on cars very much. Some guys use a 64 up Mustangs, but that's way older than a Mustang radiator. They don't look like that. They've actually got it welded in here too, right down here. So I'm gonna have to cut that loose to get it out. I'm gonna put an aluminum radiator in it, one that's larger, a little bit bigger. I mean, that radiator is tiny. Somebody's got an electric fan on it later, probably because it's had an overheating problem with this bigger motor in it. This has got a 350 in it now, so ain't no telling what all kind of motors has been on that radiator. Some people say, well, the small block Chevy bottom radiator hose is over there, so it's probably always had a Chevy in it. Well, no, that ain't true, because over here, there's a patch on the radiator right there. You can see it. It's where there used to be a hose right there, and when they went to the Chevrolet, they patched that hole and they moved their neck over there to that other side. So there's no telling what all this thing's had in it. Normally when I build these cars, I recess this firewall right here about 3 inches on small block Chevy, and I scoop this whole motor back in there. Also, you can see the distributor HEI is real tight, and when you gas on it and the motor moves a little bit, it times the distributor, makes it too fast. You're all the time having to come out here and adjust the distributor on it. I'm going to put a smaller distributor in it so that it won't do that. But we'll get underneath this thing. Like I said, we're kind of documenting some stuff here on an old 50s build. They're crude, man. I mean, back in those days, they used a torch and a arc welder and a big hammer. That's how they built cars. I can't say too much. I've built cars that way. But there's a bracket right here. You can see it right here. Got 2 holes in it. Really not sure what that was for. At first, I thought possibly that was for a brake. But it should have another big hole in it here for your brake rod. So then I got to looking at it and I thought, well, possibly this had something to do with the clutch. It had a standard shift in it. I'll show you in a little bit. I don't think we can see it from here. No, really can't see it. I ain't got a light under here. But maybe this was some type of thing to hold. I really don't know what it was. I think the shift deals was on the other side. So I really don't know what that bracket was for. But anyway, a lot of this old stuff's left under here. When they did channel this car, though, they did leave part of the subfloor in it on this side. So if I ever wanted to unchannel it and put it on original Model A frame, still has all the old bolt holes here, which would make it great for starting over again. I doubt if I ever will, though. I thought about it. Thought about building a real nice hot rod Model A frame. Right there's that other wishbone bracket right here. And turn this camera around. We're gonna look towards the rear of the car. There's just all kinds of, I don't know if this light is on or not under here. Oh, it's unplugged up there. Tell you what, let me get back out of here. Oh, it hurts. Get up. I don't get up and down too good. Let me see here. I had a, hang on here. I know this is turning into a mess, but just bear with me a minute. I'm going to turn some lights on under that car. There. Now let me get back down there. Okay. Now we got some lights. You can see all these old brackets. I had a pipe cross member, which that's great. That's stiffened up their old frame a little bit. Here's another one that they cut off. I don't know. It's probably a different kind of motor in it. Got in the way, you know. Let me hang this back here somewhere out of my way. Yeah. You know, it's probably got in the way of the drive shaft here. You know, so I don't know what that was for, but you can see over here where that it was welded on right there. It looks like they just knocked it off with a hammer, so it wasn't welded on very good there. This side here was welded on pretty good, so they just torched it off with a torch. It's got a homemade set of ladder bars in it. Heck, they're actually built pretty good. Kind of had a good idea. They made a clamp system right here. It clamps. It's got like main caps, like in a motor on it, you know, on the back of them. And I'm putting coilovers in it right now. I changed the rear end. It had a 12 bolt in it out of like a 70 GMC truck. There's no telling what all kinds of rear ends it's had in it and stuff. I'm looking up here at this plate right here that's welded. This bar here goes across the frame. The frame is Z'd up too. They Z'd it up quite a bit. Looks like a good 8 inches at least, maybe more than that. Yeah, they Z'd it up quite a bit. But I mean, it's pretty cobbly. But this plate right here is real thick, and it's welded on to this cross member, and it goes up in the trunk, and it's got a homemade deck lid on it. And a lot of times back then, those guys took their deck lids off, especially on race cars, drag cars, and they didn't run deck lids. The gas tank was in the back. The roll bars come out of their deck lid. Yeah, they had a big old pipe hoop roll bar stuck up. Had to have that to race at a sanctioned track. And I'm looking right here. There's an old abandoned gas line that's in here. It's just laying in here. When they got done with it and put a new one in, they just left that one in here. I'm gonna be taking that out. But right here, let me get a light so we can see it. Right there is the end of that roll bar they had in here. Right here, and over here's the other one. It's right up in here. And it probably come out of the deck lid. And it made a big old hoop that stuck up in the air, so if you turned over in this roadster, you know, you'd at least have a pipe holding it up, hopefully. But look how they slotted it and stuff right here. They put a big old slots in it, put it over the frame. I think they welded it on the top. Pretty scary stuff, man. I would hate to have been in it if it got flipped over. Evidently, their tech wasn't very good wherever they was at, and it come from a mid-Texas, down around Austin, down in that country down there somewhere. That's where I bought it at, so I'm sure it's been back in the 50s and the 60s. It was probably at all them old drag strips back then. It's got a big old Z cut in the floor up here. I don't know if we can see it from under here or not. Way up there, if you look, where there's a Z up there in the floor, and they had a 4-speed in this car. Of course, it's got an old turbo 350 in it right now, automatic. But I mean, you can kind of see how they built stuff back then. Pop rivets, angle iron, pieces of pipe. It's got a speaker in the floor. Now that probably come out of the 80s right there. I'm sure that's some of the 80s stuff. But this car was rebuilt in the 80s. I can show you how I can tell that too in a little bit. But all this old stuff underneath of here, look at that spring on it. See, that was their spring. I actually cut it in half. I'm going to go ahead and take a torch and knock it completely off of there. But yeah, that was the spring. Had about 2.5 inches more of that hanging down, and that was the travel on their spring on this thing. And it was welded. The spring was literally welded on top of the axle on the other axle. But I've got a Ford 8-inch in it now out of a Maverick. I like their width to use in a Model A. They're about the right width. They're just about perfect. I've had several of them in Model A's. I've had good luck with them. This one's real high geared here. This one's probably a 272 or a 300. That's transmission cooler there that they put in there. That's coming out. I'm tearing that out. When it gets a new radiator, it'll have a cooler built in it. But I'm gonna clean up. Now this is something right here, that this bracket right here. See how this this triangular looking bracket's welded on here? I thought maybe that would have been like for a ladder bar, you know, have a hole in it here, but it's real thin. So it's not for a ladder bar. I'm really not sure what that's for, to be honest with you. I've looked at that and looked at that. I want you to look at the welds on this ladder bar. I don't know if you can see it there. I mean, that's their mount right there. Look at those welds. I mean, yeah, it's scary, you know. Think about driving 100 miles an hour faster down the road in this thing with that kind. But you know, them welds have been on there a long, long, long time. Looks like they've been holding. But I'm going to kind of go over some of this stuff. I don't trust other people's stuff, especially since I've already flipped one of these cars upside down. I almost died in a Model A. I really did. I almost was killed in one. I had all souped up. But here's another bracket right here. They've got under here with a bolt sticking out of it. I don't know if that was to hold up their exhaust. I really don't know. There ain't another one over there, so I really don't know what that was for. I mean, you never know about these old cars, but this old car has been several things. This old framework and all this stuff, that's old 50s and early 60s stuff. Look at those welds right there on that pipe right there. Woo-wee. I'm telling you. And the old floor is just sheet metal. Most of it's pot riveted together. I'm going to tear the old carpet all out of it and kind of go over all that. I may rebuild some of that, weld some of that. I want to show you some more things. I mean, they was crude back then. They didn't care. All they thought about was going fast, and that was it. Look how they hacked out this big old hole back here. All they'd have needed would just been a little old slot for that axle to go up and down in. But man, somebody was torch happy back here. And I mean, they hacked that thing. I'm really not sure why they done all that, but I've seen that kind of stuff on these old cars. This ain't the first one I've seen like this. Of course, my dad was a drag racer back in the 60s. And his stuff was pretty crude too, to be honest with you. And I've seen a lot of these old cars laying around places and crude. Those headlight mounts right there. Those things look like they're off an old shopping cart. Like they took an old shopping cart and cut it up and made some mounts. That's probably a shock mount at one time. Just hanging out here. I'm going to cut that off too and restart that. But yeah, there's quite a bit of different things. I want to show you in the trunk. I want y'all look in this trunk of this car. I know my video's terrible, but hey, I'm an old man. It don't matter. Somebody's in the past, probably in the 90s or 80s or something, they probably put this racing gas tank in. It's got foam in it. That's going to go. Probably only holds 5 or 6 gallons, and don't have no place to put you don't have any place to put a gas gauge in it. But there's that plate sticking up right there, and I was showing you that's underneath the car, and there's a real good chance that's a parachute plate. Probably didn't have a deck lid on it, and it had a roll bar sticking out of here. Matter of fact, you can look right there and see the tops of those old roll bar pipes right there. You know, they probably stuck up back here, you know, come up here and around, you know, and went back down in. And, you know, they probably had their parachute tied on right there. You know, it's probably mounted back here on something. Ain't no telling. But these old cars back then, a lot of times, you know, all they had was these old drum brakes, you know, front and back, and they wasn't very good. And some of their hot rods, they didn't even put brakes on the front. So, I mean, if they was running 100 miles an hour, they just couldn't stop, especially if they had a really short track. you know, and they probably had an old parachute of some kind that they'd pull and slow the car down so they could get stopped. But this is the early days of it, guys. Look at some of these old mounts and stuff back in here. I mean, I'm really not sure what all of this. Oh, there's a board back there holding up something. I'm going to tear all this out of here, and we're going to take a better look at it. Up here is where I'm mounting my coilovers, up here. But yeah, I got a lot of cleaning up to do in this trunk. Now this car, I'm not going to make this thing perfect by no means. I'm just going to get this thing where I feel like it's safe, and you know, it would cost bukus of money to make this car nice. I mean, as rough as it is. But I'm just going to kind of, you know, patch some of this stuff up, make it look better, and get underneath of it, make all that stuff safe under there, and change all this. I want to put a gas tank in here across the back. Some of the old hot rod guys would put a Model T gas tank in here underneath, right behind this seat in here, and they'll fit in here. And they make some custom gas tanks that'll fit in there. Somebody years ago, probably in the 80s, this was a fad. They would take a motorboat, a bass boat, motorboat, ski boat, gas fill thing, and they would cut a hole right here on their car and mount that, and they'd have their gas tank back there underneath this, back down in here. They put their gas tank in there and have a hose going to it, and that's how they filled them up. And I want to redo that again. I kind of think that was a good thing that came out of the 80s. There's other things about this car. It's got a homemade deck lid on it. And right here, you can see this has all been putty. There's been a hole right here, you know. And there's been a hole over there. There's been a hole right here. If you look real close, you can see right where the hole was. And over there, I don't know if it's even welded or if it's just body puttied. I don't know. Got me. But they had a little plate right here. One old piece of angle iron. And up here, of course, the holes that Model A's have in them. And I guarantee you they had pins in here. Hood pins. And their deck lid, they could put it on here and probably pin it. And their roll bar, they probably had some kind of removable contraption on it. It's been cut off now. But you can look down in there and see where it's been cut off. But it probably had a connection that connected on it, made it come out of here, and you know, and it probably had another pole that come down here somewhere and connected. Who knows, wherever. But some of it's been removed. In the 80s, somebody built this old car. You know, you look at this interior. This screams 80s. I mean, I went to lots of car shows in the 80s. I got burnt out on them. I mean, look at them seats and stuff. I mean, they're all homemade, just foam rubber. You sit on the floor basically because the car's channeled. And this is all 80s handiwork. I mean, it's custom interior. Probably back in this day when it's brand new, it looked pretty good. It's got a console that goes in here. It come out of something. I don't know what it come out of. I have no idea. If it was a Toyota or Nissan or... It come out of something, but anyway, I've got it out right now because this shift cable on this thing was all screwed up and I had to get in here and get to it. But if you look right down there, you can see that hole right there where they had their 4-speed sticking out right there. So, I mean, they had a floor shift in, a 4-speed manual transmission at one time. Boy, the old pedals are, look at that wiring mess. I do not know why people do that. I don't know. This car don't need that many wires in it. I mean, crying out loud, this is Model A. You know, Model A don't have no wires in it. I mean, ain't nothing in it. I mean, you got your lights and your, you know, and start and stop and turn the motor on and off, and you know, it's about it. You don't hardly have any. And I don't know what all the wire there for, but it's just a wired up. I'm gonna cut all that mess out of there and throw it in the trash. I want to start all over again. But I get done with it. I'm planning on putting a bench seat in it. I'll probably cut it down, so because it is a channel car, I'll probably cut the seat down on the bottom just a little bit. I like to have a springed bench seat in it, kind of like they had. It's going to be short, so it fits underneath of the package tray area right here, just like that one fits. I don't want it sticking up. I'd like to put 51 Ford or 49 Ford or something like that straight, stick, steering column in it, put an old steering wheel back on it. Another thing that I would like to know about this car, the dashboard has got dents all over it. I mean, right here my light's touching. If you'll look in there, it's got dents all over it. And just on this one side. Let me hang this light right here, see if it's, nope, yeah. You can see all these dents all in here. Maybe if I turn this light in here, you can see. Yeah, look at all these dents. All in here. All these dents in here. Now, I piled one of these things up real bad. Turned it over end a bunch of times. Tore it all up. Threw me out. Back around over me. I don't know what. Almost killed me. But I've seen stuff like this that of my own doings. The dents all right here in the dash real bad. Somebody smeared some body putty around on them. But, you know, I look at stuff like this here. And this stuff here, I mean, all this stuff here like this here. All this stuff tells a story of this car. You know, it'd be really neat to know what happened here. You know, that looks like an accident to me, a bad one. Driver slammed over here or passenger slammed in here. Something happened right here that created all that. I don't know why they didn't fix it, but maybe they didn't want to. They just wanted to look at it and think about somebody maybe. Who knows? But anyway, they've removed the gas cap. Used to be right there. That was an old 50s deal, 60s deal. They done. Here's the grill shell. This is 28, 29 grill shell. That's a 30 or 31 car. But some guys liked these things back then because of this little, where it come down to a point right here. They would take these things, they used to be flat, and they'd pull them out real far, heat them and pull them out, and it made them kind of look like a 32 grill because they kind of had something like that. That's what they call beaking a grill, you know, like a bird beak. Then they filled the top where that's called, it's filled and peaked. This back here is beaked right there. They filled the crank hole too in it. But anyway, that's some of the stuff that I've been looking at on this whole thing. And I would kind of like to have record it, you know, that, yeah, at one time this was an old 50s hot rod, probably from the early 50s, I imagine. Might have even went back further than that. You know, I mean, they started this stuff in the late 30s, but I don't know if it went back that far or not, but it's been a hot rod for a long, long, long time. And it shows it underneath of it. In the 80s, they covered up a bunch of it. They just didn't go underneath of it and straighten it out. And then somebody's painted it since whenever I bought it. The guy I got it from, he just bought it to flip, and he ran it through a little old quickie body shop down in Texas. They just, you know, kind of hit and missed and sprayed it. It's all right for me. But anyway, I thought y'all might find some of that stuff interesting. I am going to put a dropped axle in it. I'm going to put a dropped axle in it, and I'm going to put a Model A short spring back on top of it and put it back under the radiator where it belongs. With a dropped axle, it'll set down low to the ground, lower, and it'll look right. The nose won't be way out in the front, and it'll drive better. It'll get some of the weight off the axle. The further you go to the front, the less weight you have on it. It'll drive better. Front end will be lighter. I'm going to have Vega box. I'm going to cross steer. I'm going to drive off this right front tire. Make this car drive a lot better. That'll be a big improvement on this car when I get done with it. I am going to go back to maybe some of the old days on it. Actually, you know, a 4-barrel runs better than, let's say, like 3 carburetors, you know, like 3 deuces. The old motor runs great in it. But I've got a 3-deuce setup right here. It's got 3 2-barrels on it. And I'm going to put that back on this motor over here on this car once I get all the rest of this stuff done. And kind of keep it kind of traditional. I'm going to put the little chrome turrets on it for the air breathers and stuff. That's a Charlie Price 3-deuce intake system right there. I've actually got the breather, and it's signed inside Charlie Price, he's one of the old legends. It's pretty neat. But anyway, I thought you guys might be kind of interested in some of that. these old hologram, or whatever they called them, headlights. Those was from the 50s. I looked some of them up on the net, and boy, they're asking big money for those things. These are pretty rusty and pitty, and got a war place down to the copper right here. But anyway, they do work. I'm gonna leave them on there. But anyway, I thought that you guys might be interested in that, so I guess I'll flip around. I'll catch you later.